Friends, North India has faced havoc due to unprecedented rainfall. If we had to pick one picture that's captured nature's fury, it would have to be that of the raging river Beas in Himachal Pradesh that has swept away bridges, houses, roads, vehicles, trees, and just anything that has stood in its path. The eminent military historian Shiv Kunal Verma, who stays in Kullu, has witnessed this fury firsthand. He is here with us today, and among the many hats that he wears, Kunal is a conservationist who was among the first journalists to work with Project Tiger. He played an important role in the restoration of the Mussoorie Hills, about which we shall speak shortly. Welcome, Kunal.
Thank you, Pankaj. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Same here. Tell us something about what you have witnessed in the Kulu Valley this time, and why is the Beas River so angry?
I was in Delhi. I got back on the 7th by the flight, and even then the weather was beginning to pick up. And
Okay.
by the 8th night, I mean, it was the river, the upper catchment areas were getting a lot of rainfall. And once
Hmm.
this thing just took off, the river just completely changed shape and it became almost black. It had a lot of sediment coming down. It was edge to edge. There was absolutely no islands visible, nothing. It was like a massive, massive, massive rapid. And this is something we have witnessed it in the past. In 1996, we had floods here, and we've been warning people. We've been saying, look, be careful. There are hundreds of small things you can do to prevent this kind of a thing, but nobody has ever bothered. So unfortunately, this is something which this time when the river has really shown its uh, it's really angry face. It just completely created havoc. You
You're right. We've been seeing the pictures on television, and they have been astonishing in terms of what the river has done, and houses and everything going into the river just submerging. And so you have been an active conservationist, having done pioneering work with Project Tiger and then in the Mussoorie Hills. Although you have written about it at length in your recent autobiography called Hindustani, but we would like to hear more about it from you. What exactly was this concept of eco battalions, and how did you do this restoration work?
Well, firstly, there were a lot of other people involved in this, and the main person who had the vision at that time was General Sundarji. And
Mm.
1984, he had contacted my father, and my father that time was brigadier in Jalandhar, and he
Okay.
was very much into shikar and conservation and stuff like that. I mean, it sounds like a contradiction, but it is, but they did go hand in hand. And the first wildlife workshop was held in Sareska Tiger Reserve. And my dad turned to me and a couple of my friends and said, Can you guys help out?" So one had gone from embassy to embassy, picked up films. I remember going to the Canadian embassy and getting the film on the Canadian geese, for example, getting films on various conservation things. And then about 20 odd officers were selected from Northern Command, and they were asked to drive down with their own caravans and trailers and everything. And they arrived.
Okay.
And just to give you a perspective as to how little people really knew what the hell they were getting into, one of the guys who was asked to break the ice, he was by my father asked him, he says, some lieutenant who was sitting at the edge, so it's unfortunately started from him, so he didn't have the benefit of hearing what the others had to say. He asked him,
Yeah.
when you were told you're going on a wildlife preservation workshop, what was your immediate thought? And this poor chap, he looked here, he looked there for help. He wasn't getting any. So he says, Sir, pata nahi, I'm a vegetarian. I don't know. My CEO is very fond of partridge and boiled boar. I've been sent here to learn how to make pickles. So,
Yeah.
that was the kind of mindset we had. And
Mm.
the army was at that time pretty irresponsibly shooting a lot of things. I mean, especially in the desert and everything. A lot of partridge shooting, burgi shooting, the ducks and all were being shot. Wherever the army was, it was a part of the ethos. It was a different time, it was a different era. So
Mm.
we started working on that. And at the end of this workshop, I remember having this conversation with my father. We were sitting in the caravan. And I said, listen,
Okay.
one of the things we've spent 10 days here. We've had about 20 officers who will go back and talk about it. But we need to pass a resolution. And he said, what do you have in mind? So I said, see, everybody here has a Dehradun connection. They've all been to the Indian Military Academy. They've all, everybody has that Dehradun thing. And Dehradun in that time, Pankaj, was in a absolute bloody mess. I'm sorry, there's no other word for it. You see,
Okay.
the limestone quarries had taken over the entire Mussoorie Hills. The Mussoorie Hills had
Hmm.
gone grey. They were being ripped apart. There was no vegetation left. Landslides were common. Slips were common. So we said, let's pass a resolution. So the reason why I suggested this was that there was a lady called Mady Martin. She was John Martin's wife. John Martin had been the headmaster in the school, and she
Okay.
had filed this. This was the first environmental case ever filed in India. I think Harish Salve, the eminent lawyer,
Okay.
was fighting this for her. And
This was in the Supreme Court or the High Court?
I don't remember which one. Most probably Supreme
Okay.
Court. And
Okay.
the lobbies and all were so powerful. I'll give you two examples. One, Mady Martin herself was beheaded. Yeah, she was murdered. Uh,
Oh.
and the second thing that happened, whether this was a direct reason or not, people have still don't know. But there was a lot of speculation. The second thing
Okay.
what the limestone lobby did was that Mrs. Gandhi, because of the Doon School Connect and all that, she agreed to come and do a aerial survey and have a look at the whole area because this was garnering a lot of attention at that time. So what these
Okay.
chaps did was they got hold of all the local schools in Dehradun, and that was
Hmm.
they said कि Bangladesh के refugees हैं, ये है, वो है. We need
Hmm.
to generate some money for blankets and stuff like that. So they got hold of all the schools. सब बच्चों को
Okay.
गेरू के डब्बे दे दिए जिसमें हरा रंग डाल दिया. वो पुताई के those
Acha.
brushes and they said go and start painting rocks here. So school
Acha.
swarmed up that blooming hill, and everybody was painting everything. Every time you painted a rock, so some teacher would
Hmm.
certify it, and you got 5 paisa or something, and people had sponsored. So believe it or not, they raised about 14, 15 lakhs, which in those days was a hell of a lot of money, and that was given to the Prime Minister's relief fund. So, the PM came, she saw the area from a helicopter. She said, "My gosh, this is looking like the Alps. This is more beautiful than
Hmm.
anything I've seen because." Not only was it green, it had been painted green in various hues also, so that it looked very nice.
Mounted to perception.
So this is the kind of a thing we were dealing with. Then
Hmm.
one of the things, then General Sundarji, even before the workshop, one day I used to interact with him off and on. He was also from Madras Christian College, which was my college too. So he had said,
Okay.
he had asked me, he said, if you form these eco battalions, what do you think, what's your concept on that? So what's your idea on that? And I was
The
working
Eco
with
Battalions, the military
yeah,
battalions.
yeah, territorial battalions. So that time I
Okay.
was working very closely with Mr. H.S. Pawar. He was the not the first director of Project Tiger, but at that time he was the director of Project Tiger. He was also the
Acha.
founder director, I think, of the Wildlife Institute in Dehradun later, and he's the man who made Kana what it was. And Pawar
Okay.
Saab, and there was S.K. Mukherjee, and they were wonderful guys. There was Mr. Rao. Uh,
Hmm.
Superb individuals, And so I say, all right, the chief's asking this or the army commander is asking, what should we do? हाँ हाँ इसको
Hmm.
करो ये करो. So he then told me, he said, all right, what do you think? So one of the eco battalions was raised for the Mussoorie Hills. The other one we had suggested that it be raised around the Barpeta region of Assam, but they placed it actually at Fort William. Anyhow, whatever the
So
reason for
Barpeta
that,
was also having environmental issues at that time. There were similar problems there.
Barpeta had different kind of issues because you see, Barpeta is where the Manas River debouches out of the Bhutan hills. And
Okay.
the part of the reserve is the Royal Reserve on the Bhutan side, and the other half is on our side.
Hmm.
We had problems like poaching. We had the Bodo issue was also beginning to raise its head at that time, and we knew
Right.
that there was going to be a bit of a problem. So having an army ecological battalion there would have certainly helped. Um, we had we were looking at various things. You see, because the ecology of the Himalayas, unfortunately, is just not being understood by anybody. The
You're right.
the and everything is very ad hoc. उसको करेंगे तो करेंगे. And actually, the solutions are not that difficult. Very, very,
Hmm.
very easy to bring into place. So General Sundarji asked me to. He said, "You write me a report. You write me a utopian
Okay.
report. I said, what you
Okay.
think can be." So I came
Hmm.
home. I had a Remington typewriter. We didn't have laptops in those days. We didn't have computers. So and I didn't. My ribbon wasn't working. So I still remember I had to reverse it. So I actually typed that
Right.
report, that 4-page report with the red side of the ribbon. It was a red and a black ribbon. I gave it to
Hmm.
him, and it was nothing but common sense. Yeah, कि ये करना चाहिए, ये करना चाहिए, ये करना चाहिए. And the TA battalion in Mussoorie Hills, it frankly deserves a Bharat Ratna by itself because you go and see the Mussoorie Hills, not just Mussoorie, the entire belt stretching up to Dhanolti and that entire area. It's a verdant jungle now, yeah. And they brought it
Okay.
right down to Rajpur Road and everything. So today, now 20, 35 years or almost 40 years after this thing was set up, I think they were set up in 82, 83, 84, sometime around that time.
Right.
Look at it now. I mean, so the reason I'm talking about this is that this is very doable. It's something which is not something which is in folklore. Situation is so bad. The situation was very
Hmm.
bad then, and we managed to reverse it there. No reason why we can't do that here as well.
So these eco battalions are still in existence. They are still
Yeah,
based
yeah,
there.
very, very much so. And I think state governments have also been doing something. I'm not really up to steam on exactly what's going on. But what happened in
Okay.
2014 when the
Hmm.
elections took place? Uh, at that time, General VK Singh became the donor minister with independent charge. He was Minister of State with independent
Yes.
charge. So at
Yeah.
that time, I had worked out I was very excited because I thought this was a great opportunity. So I suggested to him that we approach the PMO with this very simple plan that
Okay.
we have how many districts in India? Yeah, we have about 720 districts, but I think we have about 540 MPs or whatever. So we said, let's have an ecological battalion for every district in the country.
Okay. That's
And a
interesting.
certain major component of that would actually be women, right? Let's say we have a battalion is 1,000 men, उसमें से 600 have 600 women. Base, give
So
them,
then these would not be,
give
then
them,
these would not be TA battalions. These would be some other kind of battalions.
well, give it whatever nomenclature you want. The idea is to get the job done. So,
Right.
so the idea was raise these battalions and have four advisors to each MP. One guy from the
Hmm.
armed forces, right? One guy from the police services, one guy from the all retired people, bureaucracy, and get one
Right.
forester. And these
Okay.
people would be tasked with three major things in every district. The management of water bodies. See, water bodies in India have been completely and absolutely ignored. Every village used to
Right.
have its own tank. Every temple used to have its own tank. Everything. And these were all part of a very elaborate rain harvesting water management system, which nobody ever talks about. I mean, it's
Yes.
if you look at the entire temple structure of South India, all those temples. See, uh, I was talking to Mr. Darshan Singh this morning, and he's the chairman
Hmm.
of Boys. He's an engineer by profession, and
Okay.
he's just written an article for Sunday Guardian. I think it'll come out day after tomorrow, and he makes this
Hmm.
point. He says that every village, every city, every town has a slope
Yeah.
chart. Has a slope chart. They're not followed. Now, if the
Yeah.
Pallavas had the slope charts, the Cholas had the slope charts. They have worked out an elaborate system where temples were all interlinked. Water used to feed from
Yeah.
one to the other. Now you've cut across with highways, you've cut across with bunds, you've done whatever you've constructed on some of these areas. You are asking for trouble. If our ancient
Yeah.
fathers knew what to do, I mean, which generations? Where are we? Why have we thrown away all this knowledge? It's all there, and we just don't want to do it because the moment this flood gets over, for about a month or so, we'll all suffer while bridges, everything are reconstructed. Then we'll get on with our lives. We don't give a damn.
No, you're absolutely right. This pattern has been seen again and again. You've recently been to Arunachal also, and you've been flying over the area. And if you look at the entire span of the Himalayas in the subcontinent from Ladakh, J&K, then Himachal, Uttarakhand, across Sikkim, Arunachal, the rest of the northeast, do you see a pattern there of the kind of development or destruction or the challenges we have? Do you see any pattern across these areas?
I had a long chat with the governor, General, His Excellency General KT Parnaik about this because a lot of development is now taking place
Okay.
we doing a lot of this because of border infrastructure, and also it's about time a lot of development did happen because but this development needs to be tempered. You have to be very careful that you are taking uh, adequate steps to make sure that the environment doesn't get damaged. I mean, I remember talking about this in the 80s. My dad was in Jalandhar, and that time the Pong Dam had been built, and we used to go and fish for Maser there. And
Okay.
the Pong Dam had I mean, I don't remember the figures now, but maybe some 500, 600 crores at that time. And
Hmm.
all we needed was a fish ladder. All we needed was a fish ladder. And I remember General Jagannathan, who had built that dam. In fact, his house was right there. I asked him, sir, iska,
right.
what is the cost of a fish ladder? And he said 2 lakhs. But they wouldn't sanction it. 2 lakhs in a 500 crore project. You don't want a fish ladder which is 2 lakhs. So the entire this used to be the breeding ground for masse. It used to be absolutely fantastic masse fishing. Abhi bhi hai thodi bahut, but it's not in the same region. So we just
Yeah.
don't seem to be able to get our priorities right. You look at all the 5 rivers in Arunachal right now. They used to be your main spawning centers for all the fish in the Brahmaputra. Today, you
Hmm.
walk along the banks of the Brahmaputra, you see these gigantic Chinese nets, and the fish they're catching are the size of my little finger. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It simply doesn't
So the
exist.
damage has happened.
You have when you were building
Yeah.
roads, suddenly there was a lot of dynamite available. You went and blasted all the damn thing. You kill for the
Correct.
guy will throw a dynamite stick into the water to harvest 5 or 6 kilos of fish which he's going to eat, but he kills over 2 million or 3 million fingerlings. Yeah, I mean, we until you start thinking like that, you're not going to be able to do anything. And this is a problem which is universal. I mean, you go to Sundarbans, you go to Chilka Lake, you go to the South India areas. I mean, water is a problem either which way. Either it's not there, you're suffering from famine, or if you've got it, you don't know how the hell to manage it. So, what are we doing,
Yesterday in your
and where are we going?
yesterday yesterday in your tweet, you had mentioned that some conservation efforts in Nilgiri hills have been very successful. What are these methods that we can adopt?
See, in the 70s, my dad was posted in staff college, and I remember landslides and slips are very common. Now, see, a lot of people are not aware of this, that a lot of India's forest policies, forestation, has actually been the direct
Yeah.
result of the 1857 uprising. You call it the mutiny or the War of Independence, whichever way you want. The British actually, after 1857, went about really planting and planting and planting because they wanted sal for the sleepers for the railway tracks, and they needed teak for the ships, all British Navy ships, etc. I mean, teak was the big thing. The entire ecology of the region changed, and this impacted the hills in a very different sort of a way, in a more positive, a more negative sort of a way. Nilgiris, for example,
Okay.
used to have a lot of blue pine, which I think was I'm not sure of the biological names now, but it used to have a wonderful smell. I mean, the whole thing in the Nilgiris used to be that blue pine wala smell in the morning. And that started getting replaced by eucalyptus. And it became kind of almost madness. I mean, it was insane the amount of eucalyptus which was being planted in the Nilgiris because it was supposed to absorb water and this, that, and the other. And this started leading to landslides and other kind of problem. Whether the eucalyptus was directly responsible or not, I don't know. But I remember
Right.
somebody coming up with this absolutely wonderful idea, and they started putting nets, gigantic nets. Now, when you think of putting a net on a mountain, you get a completely different idea. How the hell can you do it? But actually, it's done in very
Yeah.
differently. They weave the net onto the hillside. They got these
I see.
this thick jute ropes, and they put them from top to bottom, and then giving each square about one square meter or whatever. They put them left to right.
Right.
Now, what happened was you
Right.
ended up with a grid like that, which was holding all your vulnerable areas wherever the vegetation had gone, etc. They started putting these nets, not blindly over everything, in the areas where there were
Right.
slips, where they had been cutting for roads, etc. Now, what
Right.
this did was jute is a natural thing. It's kind of went into the soil, and it formed
Mm.
a kind of a terrace cultivation kind of a thing because little patches of mud started sticking to it, and they started planting
Right.
grass. When you start planting grass, after a while those nets disappear. But you can make out the pattern.
Right.
If you take a kind of a distance shot of it, you can see those little squares perhaps still exist, or maybe they're gone now. And
Mm.
here again, you have to look at all three forms of vegetation. You've got to look at the grass, you've got to look at shrubs, and you've got to look at trees. There's no point planting trees in isolation and without looking at shrubs and without looking at grass. You actually have to start the other way around. Go with grass, go
Yeah,
with
it's ecosystem.
shrubs. You do that now. Here in the Kulu Valley, for example, I've been, you know, we've got some very good people here. I mean, I've been in touch with the SPs of the police, the DCs, the ADMs, everyone there. I've also been involved with Labasta and have spoken there a few times. I know some of these people from there. They are all
Yeah.
they're all very open to ideas and wanting to do things. But you see, this is actually a socio-political thing. Because today we turn around and say, okay, curtail tourism. I mean, you guys are, the carbon imprint is far greater than what the hills can take. Nobody is going to bell that cat, because how do you do it? Uh,
So
at
in
the,
fact, I'm
right
coming to
now,
the
everybody
question in a
wants to
different
make that money straight away. And how, a politician thinks I'll lose all the votes here. अगर मैं ये करूँगा.
no, no.
You have to take the.
The context the context I wanted to raise there was that actually tourism has boomed because of the tunnels and the four laning and the kind of roads we are now constructing in the mountains. And one of the aspects to this road construction and tunneling is our national security requirement, because we have a live border with China, we have to move troops, equipment, and we need all weather roads, all weather access. So, in that sense, the development was a foregone conclusion that they would, blast the hills, construct these highways. But what it has done is easy tourism. So, for example, Kullu, which used to, or Manali, which used to take you 8 hours from Chandigarh, today takes you 3.5 or 4 hours, and anybody can just plan a day's trip, to Manali now and come back, which has resulted in this massive boom, which is causing damage to the fragile hills. So how do you get this balance right? We do need the roads, we do need the tunnels, but how do we manage it properly and at the same time balance tourism?
You don't have to look very far. I mean, look at what Bhutan has done. You go for
Hmm.
you just got to control it. You go for high end tourism. You put massive taxes on the anybody coming in from outside, and
Okay.
let people come. Tourism is not something which is a negative thing per se. But right now, what is
Yeah.
happening in Kulu? Abhi the tunnels have just abhi to सारे tunnels खुले भी नहीं हैं. अभी तो half the main ones are still not fully up. I
Right.
welcome the tunnels also, because it makes my life a lot easier with coming and going now. It will take me 8 hours to
Yes.
get down to Chandigarh. But the point
Yeah.
is that we have to be able to, you know, control this, because if you don't control it, you're going to be in very
Yeah.
serious trouble. Now, the situation today, Pankaj, is that people in the valley, in Kulu, are sleeping in tents here, because everybody is
Hmm.
converting the thing into a homestay. Already, Manali used to be a madhouse, but now you go to any of the side roads on the way to Manali, people
Right.
have shifted out of the houses because the demand is there. Demand, and so अपना घर में उसको होम स्टे बना दिया, वो 4-5 हज़ार रुपए रात के बन रहे हैं उनके. So, भाई, the point is very good. Yeah, it's good for your economy. It's good for you. You think you can make a lot of money out of all this, but the fact is, you can't do. See, this is what we did when Kudu initially became orchards.
Right.
Apples and plums and all were planted. What did they do? They looked at the indigenous trees, something I believe it's called Kush over here. उसको आपने कहा यार
Hmm.
इसमें तो we can't make any money out of this. So they started cutting the Kush trees and making the crate
Hmm.
for the plums and the this thing. Now, when the floods have
Hmm.
happened, wherever the river has the Kush trees hanging around there, that area has not got impacted at all. Believe it or not. In fact, on the tweet, I had put those photographs showing how those islands, despite the fury of what had happened, had still held their ground, because they have a very
Hmm.
complex routing system. Resorts which
Right.
have escaped because they have not cut those trees. Wherever you
Correct.
cut those trees, the river's gone. It's not just the main river; it's your side feeder streams which are coming in. You got to do this,
Yes.
and it's not that it can't be done. It's something.
Hmm.
I mean, just get your act together. After I had tweeted, somebody had actually said you don't have to go for jute nets. He's given an example of some Western technology where he says it's been tried and tested. Come on, get serious. When you are cutting all the hills down towards, out used to be one of the most beautiful valleys in the whole thing. Today, the Senge also has run rampant. The Parvati has run rampant. All these rivers are running rampant because you're cutting, cutting.
One reason is the huge influx of vehicles also, because every road, every nook and corner is now crammed with vehicles, even in Himachal. And in fact, the maximum damage has also happened to vehicles only. The river has swept them away at a glance.
You just have to cut
And
it
as far
down.
as
You just
what I've been observing in the Shimalik Hills is they're using steel nets. So what little I've observed on the highway to Shimla, they're using steel nets to hold the mountains they have cut together, and the slopes are so steep what they have cut that the landslide is bound to occur. I mean, one wonders why they can see it. Any layman can see it that this mountain is not going to be stable the moment the rains come, and yet we are not changing the
The
techniques.
other thing they do is they cut vertically down. While they're cutting for the road,
Yeah,
you
cutting vertically.
you think you're only damaging less area, but actually, if you were to have an incline of 75 degrees or something like that, cut deeper,
Right,
you
right.
give yourself a chance. But you see what happens when you're cutting steeply, वो उड़ जाता है. As a result, You keep cutting, cutting, cutting till you actually end up with much more damage than what you originally were thinking about. Also, lip
Right.
service is not enough. You just say that we have, because see, the rules for every district, every state, every area is different. You have to be able
Correct.
to apply common sense to it. What applies to Trivandrum, just as what applies to Trivandrum does not apply to Kashmir. Uh,
From a barrel, yeah,
every
get
curve on the road is different. You have to have people who are dedicated. You need to figure it out. What is the soil content? क्या है? यहाँ कौन सी घास लगेगी? यहाँ क्या लगेगा? You better do it.
which
नहीं
means
तो
that
ऐसे
you
मरोगे
know,
तो पता
the
भी नहीं
locals
चलेगा
have to,
क्या हो रहा
the people who will have to carry this burden. And so you're right, Kunal. I mean, the net takeaway is always the same, that people must learn their lessons and act. And unfortunately, that is where we fail every time. We fail to act and we fail to take our lessons home for a long period of time. But thank you so much. It's been very interesting gaining these insights into conservation and ecology and how we can build more sustainable methods to save our hills. And we look forward to having you again on Fauji Days very soon. It's been a third conversation, and there's so many more topics that we would like to talk to you about.
है.
Thank you so much.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to use your platform to actually
Yeah.
reach out to the state government of Himachal in particular.
Okay.
And of course, in Arunachal also, I intend to discuss this when I go there later this month. There are some conservationists and people who like Bittu Segal and, 150 guys. I mean, I'm only just mentioning Bittu because there's so many names I can't even think of. You know, you need to bring all these people on board.
Right.
You have the expertise. These are the guys who are telling you what to do. They've been writing about it, they've been talking about it, they've been hammering away. There's no point appointing committees which are and paying them a few crores for a report which is going to gather dust, because by the time that report comes, matter is over. You don't need to
Right.
spend a hell of a lot of money. Make this a socio-economic movement. You have to involve the people, because it's the people whose survival is at stake. They're not idiots here. You start talking to them the right language and you start educating them correctly, it will work. The state government wants to do it. There are enough people here who we can get together, but there has to be a political will. This is now a war. This is a war from within. You can keep facing China and Pakistan and singing whatever you want, but if you're going to erode from inside, you're going to be dead ducks. So whatever one can do and guide and advise, etc., one is willing to do. But the eventual the can has to be carried by the state government, and I would really like to appeal to them, because there are so many people in this country who have the expertise. Bring them together. This country is too precious. For God's sake, do something now before you're going to lose it all. The Himalayas are simply crumbling before your eyes. If you can't see it, God help you.
Thank you. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I hope your message goes to the authorities and they take this. Take care, because there's still prediction of heavy rainfall in the next 4 days, and we're still in the middle of the monsoons. So please take care. You're in a sensitive area. Wish you the best.
I think
Thank you.
every area is sensitive now, Pankaj. So are you. Okay, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.